Everybody, this is Rod Meldrum, the Book of Mormon Evidence Guy, and we're here at the Firm Foundation Expo, the 34th International Book of Mormon Evidence Conference, and I have with me somebody that probably doesn't need to be introduced, but in case you are hiding under a rock somewhere, you've never heard of him, this is Greg Matsen with Cwic Media. I'm grateful to have you here, Greg.
Rod, very glad to be here. I think this is my 5th conference.
Is that right? Yeah. Well, so Greg has been just really instrumental in addressing a lot of things that are things that you just don't normally get when you go to your gospel doctrine class, or you're going to your priest quorum or your elders quorum or whatever. Not that it's anything that's odd or different, as far as that's concerned, but just in 45 minutes, there's just no way you can get to any kind of depth and detail in a lot of different things. And a lot of people, I think, today really want to be able to explore more deeply the gospel of Jesus Christ. We have more experts and scholars, more information than ever before, and in fact, we're flooded with it. and I just want to just right at the outset here is to just thank you for your faithful responses. There are people who are trying to be apologetics or do apologetics for the church that are sometimes more faithful to their particular ideologies than they are to the doctrines of the church, and I've found you to be completely faithful with that, even though sometimes it may seem that we walk a line.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, it's interesting because there's a space, I think, where I'll give you an example. I have had several people that follow my podcast that have been on YouTube, and they see a thumbnail or a title of mine, and they think, oh, I'm not sure if this is faithful or not.
Yeah.
Right? They're not sure about it because it's covering a topic, or it's the approach to it. Never anything that's against. It's I've never done anything like that. But it's I think there's areas where we as Latter-day Saints have built a culture where we are so proper and buttoned up, that we think we're not supposed to go in these areas and talk about them. And I think that's really unfortunate. I think that you need information. Is it President Russell that said the best inspiration comes from more information or something?
Good information. Good information. Yeah.
Good inspiration comes from good information.
Yeah.
So I think we need the information, and we need to talk about these things. And there's no way to really hash these things out in your mind. Everything that we are bombarded with today, to hash this all out and understand how you approach all of these different ideas and these mists of darkness without talking about it or hearing about it.
Yeah, well, I tell you, just the when you mentioned the titles of some of your podcasts and so forth. Well, the title of your talk today, which just finished up just a few minutes ago, I think I had a lot of people kind of going, "What?" Because the title of the talk was "Families Are for Never."
Yeah.
And everybody, especially all of us boomers,
Yeah.
We're very familiar with the Families Are Forever campaign that the church did and so forth. So I was like, what? Families are for never? Probably better explain that one. Go ahead and explain what your talk was.
Yeah,
It was awesome, by the way. Fantastic.
I think in the printed pamphlet you have, it has a subtitle to it, which is
it does.
The Attack on the Traditional Family.
Exactly.
But that's I do that, and that's oftentimes, like you say, these thumbnails and things that I put up, because I think that we need to go into that space a little bit.
Makes you think.
And understand those that don't want families to be forever, the movements, the ideologies, the systems, the teachings, the institutions that are fighting against that type of an order. And if we don't see that and recognize it, then when it comes on us, I don't know that we're really ready when that arrives to handle it. I mean, what do you do when someone says, well, you can tolerate everything because that's love? And you haven't really thought about that before. Well, is that what Jesus said? Is that what love is? Is that what charity is? President Holland just had a great talk on this in the character of Jesus. Yeah. And it's like, no, that charity is tethered in truth. That charity is tethered in justice. And if we haven't codified that in our minds and in our hearts, I think it's really hard to combat it.
Yeah, I think you're right. In fact, I've many times have talked about this balance between basically justice and mercy,
Mm-hmm.
and I think and especially the early part of the church, kind of things tended to lean towards the justice side,
Mm-hmm.
And when you read the Bible and so forth, there's definitely a side of the justice part of it, that God will not be mocked, for example,
Right.
that there are penalties to be paid when you basically thumb your nose at God and ignore Him. But it seems like in our society specifically, but also I see this really becoming more and more rampant within the church, is the idea that basically mercy just overcomes everything. And it is true as far as that Christ's atonement does apply to equally for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that that charity is is such an incredibly important part of this, but we have, I think, moved away from the idea that if you do wrong things, there are penalties, there are judgments and consequences that go along with it. And so I think it was you that maybe coined the term teddy bear Jesus, which that some people may think, okay, that's a little sacrilegious, but bottom line is that I think it's so apropos to our day, because we have this people who basically go, it's the Antichrist Korahors, and some of these other individuals that basically said, don't worry about it, just live your life, and you'll be beaten with a few stripes at the end, but everything's just going to be okay.
Yeah.
Which is not true.
It's not true. And if you follow that line of thinking and you teach that line of thinking, you're not helping yourself and you're hurting others.
Yeah.
And so it's like, how do you balance that, as you said? And the way I look at it is, if you reduce judgment and say, well, I don't want to deal with that.
Yeah.
Right. I don't want to deal with that. Then what you're doing is you're removing the purpose of the atonement itself. Right. If I say that there are no consequences and I'm not worried about that,
Then what's
and I
the
want
point?
to, what is the point of the atonement to begin with? I need the atonement. I want the atonement, not just because Christ paid for my sins, but because I need a relationship with Him. And I firmly believe that part of the plan of salvation is not, okay, well, He paid for this, so now I'm good to go. But it's actually the development of a relationship with Him that is created through that atoning sacrifice. And without that relationship, I don't think that we can actually fulfill who we're supposed to be.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And in fact, the whole idea, I mean, we know that it is by grace, that we are saved. A lot of people leave out the second part of that, after all that we can do. There's been a lot. There's kind of actually, I've seen a shift in the church, even basically saying, what, the works are, okay, so your works is one thing, but really it's all just grace.
Mm-hmm.
There is some truth to that, because we all need Christ's grace. But those who refuse to obey God's commandments are already showing that they are not willing to follow His ways and not willing to have that relationship. I think it's going to be really critical. I had a friend of mine one time that kind of put it this way: when the judgment comes, you're standing before God, and the way he kind of put it is, here you have 360-degree screens all around you, basically, and all of a sudden,
it's terrifying.
Things in your life start showing up on the screen, and you're looking and go, I remember that with mom and dad. It was remember how happy I was when this was going on, and so forth. And then all of a sudden you go, oh, wait a minute, oh no, don't play that part, not that part. I was in a bad place that part, and you're standing there before God.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden the video goes blank, and you feel a hand on your shoulder, and you look over and it's Christ is standing there next to you. Said, I paid for that part. Yeah. Continue on. Yeah. And just how that would feel to be actually there in the judgment, having Christ basically literally vouching for you before the Father, because of the repentance process. But if you're so afraid of calling people to repent of things that are known to be sin, in an effort to coddle them or to try to, I don't want to offend them. I mean, I think last night we had, I think it was in your talk actually last night that mentioned about the, are we more afraid of offending someone than we are of telling the truth?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a prime example. If somebody is there'd be thousands of examples, but somebody is basically on a path that is going to, it's going to lead to their death or destruction, and you don't say anything because you might be afraid of offending them, where's the love?
Yeah.
If you really love that person, wouldn't you try to stop them from going off the cliff? Wouldn't you try to stop them from taking that drug or from making mistakes that are going to affect them eternally? And that I'm not talking about just physical stuff. I'm talking about eternal things. And are we afraid of mentioning things that are of eternal nature just because we don't want to offend someone?
Yeah, and I think that's part of the culture of our church to some degree, and I think that's why we are somewhat susceptible to some of these ideologies, because of that idea of wanting not to offend, right? We've put this value of politeness, which is a value.
It right? is,
but we've taken that sometimes and put it above truth, and we've put it above a tethering of something directly to Christ and the doctrine of Christ, and that's concerning. That's unfortunate, and that's why I say, when we talk about these things more and hash them out a little bit more, then we don't need to sit behind a veil of politeness all the time, right? It's like, well, I was being polite. I'm going to hold this value up. I was being polite, and so I'm good. We don't need to do that. I don't think that is going to help us a lot. And that's not to say I'm looking for contention, but that is to say you're going. Contention to me is, how do you react to conflict?
Yeah.
There's going to be conflict. If the world is moving and sliding down toward Babylon and you don't want to, there's going to be conflict. There's no way around that. And so the question is, how do I respond to it? Do I attack those individuals? Now I'm being contentious, right? Or do I talk about the truth and do I stand up for what I believe is right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of funny because people tend to misunderstand conflict and contention with being able to have a strong belief in something. So you can contend. I mean, controversial is the word I was looking for. Controversial versus contention.
Right.
If people say, well, that's controversial. Well, wasn't Christ kind of controversial in his day? Mm-hmm. Wasn't Joseph Smith sort of controversial in his day? Controversy is not the issue. It's how you deal with the controversy. And if you go in an attack mode, you can't do that, because then that becomes more on the other side.
Yeah, and I think that's a great example. And of course, you can go to almost every prophet throughout the scriptures and ask, were they controversial?
Yeah. And let me tell you, if you stand for anything, it's going to be controversial, because Satan has an opposite agenda. If you're not getting any kind of kickback or any kind of pushback in your life, it's kind of like the World War II pilots used to say, when you're over the target when you're catching flak, right? Yes. Because if you're not catching any flak, then maybe you're not much of a threat to Satan and his minions and his ideologies. So are you catching some flak?
Yes, on 360.
I know that's a dumb question.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, but we as Latter-day Saints, we know that ultimately, will there be flak? Yes, there will be flak. Will there be difficulties? Yes, there's going to be difficulties. Will it be worth it? And I think the answer to that is clearly yes, it will be worth it. But and a lot of times people have a tendency to think of themselves in this situation. I know one of the other things I wanted to mention that, but just to finish that little thought there, we need to, as members of the church, need to start thinking less about ourselves and more about how we can help others. I have a lot of people say, well, I'm good. I'm okay. Well, great. But if you're okay, who are you helping? How are you helping? What are you doing to help other people who are struggling? Because there are a lot of people who are struggling. There's no doubt about it right now. And people like you who have the ability to articulate answers to people's questions and put it and frame it in a way, because so many times it's the framing of something that's off.
Mm-hmm.
And be able to frame the question more properly is a big step in moving people toward the truth.
Yeah, and I think it's what I try to do is I since my mission I had a real scriptorian as a.
By the way, where'd you serve?
Mexico City.
Sweet.
Yeah. So I had a real scriptorian as a mission president. So he taught me a few things, and ever since then, I have just delved into the scriptures and always been there. And so that's hard to root out, right? So I try to stick to that.
That's kind of the anchor.
It's like I hear something here, or I hear something there, and it might sound good, but it's like, yeah, but this is what Amulek said, this is what Alma said, this is what Nephi said. And so if you've got that, then I think that really helps you tether yourself.
Yeah.
You can step into areas that are controversial.
Yeah.
Right. If you're anchored in those things. And so hopefully I have enough of that anchoring that I can step out into these areas and show people this framed under a scriptural platform.
Which is one of the things I really love about your podcast that you do. You're very thoughtful, very scripture based, and not blown by different winds of doctrine and so forth that go on there, which is refreshing actually, because there are even LDS apologists who basically are kind of more interested in defending their own particular pet positions than they are in defending the position of the church.
Right.
And so that's fantastic. Well, there's so many other things that we need to talk about, but one of the things I wanted to just mention also, and that is that in the presentation you just did, back in was it 1975 when the Proclamation on the Family came out? 95. Yeah, 95. Excuse me. Yeah, 1995. You just did an amazing presentation in regard to that. But I remember when that came out, I was just thinking, well, duh, this is like, this is the obvious stating of the obvious kind of thing. This is the Proclamation on the Family. With the husband and wife, man and woman, basically, and wow. That was inspired to be 25 years before its time, but now we see that we can't even define what a woman is.
Right. Yeah. And
as a society.
And I think that that's a really good example of conflict and contention, right? It's like, okay, back then that's not controversial at all.
Not at all.
Nothing.
Yeah.
But now, even within the church and members of the church, right? If you bring it up, then it's like, well, you're using it as a bully club or something. Or so it's not the truth that moved. It's our culture that has moved and new ideas that have moved, and that's going to create some conflict. And even men's and women's roles and so forth. And when it comes down to God's most important unit, which he talks about, as being the family, the family, and families have been just torn apart so badly. I mean, it used to be 10 or 15 years ago. I would ask people to be on my tours or different groups and so forth I'd be speaking to. I said, how many of you know somebody who has gone through the entire church, from seminary to institute, served missions, married in the temple, made covenants and so forth, who are now left the church? And 10, 15 years ago, I would get maybe, 5 or 6 hands out of a group of, 100, 200 people or whatever. Now it's almost everybody. Yeah.
Has somebody that they know that has gone through all of those prerequisite steps and have made the decision to basically leave the church. And it's just it's an epidemic. And I think one of those things that is happening is that the church is doing its best to get information out, but we as members of the church have kind of left it all on the church's responsibility to do that. And I think there's a generation kind of people who are coming up. I look at the Paul brothers and Ward Radio and so forth, who are trying to address the concerns of younger generations that are dealing with this from their public schools and everything else, and their culture and the online and so forth, and trying to help them stay the course that will lead to happiness and eternal life.
And I think a lot of those people that have left the church, I think there are a number of them that are going to find their way back. There is there's the very truthful story of Shrek, right? and Shrek, he says, we're like onions, he says, right? We have many layers.
Yeah.
And I think that's what happens with the truth, right? It's like you were taught something in primary. It doesn't seem to be exactly that way. And so this layer has been removed. And you say, well, this isn't the same onion that I had seen before, right? But what is not understood there are more layers still to pull back that will reveal more truth and understanding if you just keep going and seeing that. And so I think a lot of those people will come back. However, I do think that these mists of darkness, these philosophies and ideologies that we are facing are very powerful. And there is a force there that just is nonstop. It's not going to quit.
I will have to say that in my experience that it is far easier to inoculate someone in advance and give them answers before they start to really get to the point where the doubts become just overwhelming, and pretty soon the only focus is the doubts. If you can inoculate people and give them answers to questions, this has been one of the big problems that because of the lack of particular positions on certain things that are taught in academia and so forth. People just kind of assume that the church doesn't have answers, and if you look at like the CES letter and so other things, there's a lot of questions in there dealing even with scientific things and family things and scriptural things, and when people can't get answers to what would be should be kind of easy questions, but because of the cultural situation, we can't just you can't just like, okay, here's the answer, right? Because it's going to go against what they're being taught in school and so forth. It does cause, cognitive dissonance, I think is the term for that, which where their mind is telling them one thing, their heart's telling them another thing, and it's not comfortable when your heart and your head are not at one with each other. And so,
and I think we're going to have to learn to be comfortable there. I do think that's part of it, because I don't think there's going to be more and more things. Yeah. Whether it's people with church history or it's ideologies or it's sexual orientation or it's, identity, whatever else it is, I think those things are I think that if we can anchor ourselves enough in the scriptures and in Christ and in the covenant path, then as these things come on, I think we can stand in that space, and we might have to do that. We might have to live there.
Because there will always be questions that are not yet answered. Mm-hmm. But there are answers to a lot of these questions if we are willing to let go of the secular understanding of things and hold on to those things that come from the Lord.
Well, look, that's the process of creation, right? I mean, you're taking chaos and you're creating order out of it. Yeah. And so we're not creating ourselves and we're not becoming unless we can step at least a little bit into that space of chaos but take the chaos and create order out of it. Yeah. Right. And I think that's a process that we have to learn. It's a process that is not always comfortable for everyone.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of what Keith Merrill one time said. He said, the great filmmaker Keith Merrill and so forth that did Legacy and the Testaments and so forth. He said, it's kind of like you got to hang on to that iron rod. He says, but the nice thing is that God has made our, we can stretch. We can pull a long ways from the iron rod, but as long as we hang on to it and always come back to it, we'll be okay. And it's interesting how God has allowed a lot of different ideas and so forth to be okay, and to explore different ideas and different thoughts in regard to a lot of different things. But ultimately we got to go back to that base.
Yeah, that's right.
The scriptures, the prophets, and if we hang on to that, that's where the happiness happens. And
yeah, I think it is. Again, you've got to have opposition in all things. There's got to be opposition in all things, because there is no joy without the sorrow, and there is no order without chaos.
And I don't think that you can become like God is unless you learn how to make decisions like God makes. Yeah. And so learning to make those decisions, making the mistakes, learning from those mistakes, and constantly going back to that is kind of, I think, what makes God God. It's the reason why He is so smart and knows all things, because he doesn't. You don't have to make every mistake to learn, but you do have to be able to be willing to have the opportunity to make the mistakes and then make the right choices. And then as you learn to make those right choices, it moves you closer and closer to happiness and to God.
Yeah, I agree.
But anyway, so listen, Greg, we want to thank you again for coming up here from the arid zone and from being down there and keeping things cool while it's hot down there. We're moving into our cold time of the year. You guys moving into the nice time of the year right now for you guys.
Exactly.
So you're probably happy to get back there with your family. Yeah. But again, just want to my respect for you, what you're doing. Keep it up. And God bless you.
Thanks, Rod. Really appreciate it.
You bet. All right, everybody. If you're enjoying some of these interviews that we're doing and the things that are going on there, go ahead and hit the subscribe button below, and you can go to bookofmormonevidence.org for information that we have, and also you can go to
cwicmedia.com or YouTube and find Cwic Media.
Yeah, and check it out. There's some fantastic things there. If you are somebody you know is having a faith crisis. And some of these different subjects, please, check it out. I think you'll find it to be a real blessing for your life, and hopefully give you some reasons to continue to have faith. So, thanks. Keep the faith.